Welcome everybody. This is going to be our final webinar with the Cannon River Watershed Joint Powers Organization. I'm Ryan Lerman. I'm an extension educator for Ag and Natural Resources here in Rice and Steele County. Just to let everybody know, the webinar is being recorded. If anybody has any questions, use the Q&A function down at the bottom of the screen there. That way we don't lose anybody's questions in the chat anywhere. After we go through all the presentations, that's when we're going to address all the questions. So we'll get to them all at the end. And then so this month, we have Victoria Ranua from Dakota County Soil and Water, and she's going to be representing the Cannon River Watershed Group. And then our main speaker is Ann Nelson, and she is from Minnesota Department of Health. And our talk today is going to be around well water and well water testing and all the things that go with that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Victoria. And you are muted, just so you know.
And presentation. All right, so welcome everyone. So the Cannon River Watershed is an area that encompasses several counties. I've brought up the map, and then in 2016 we had a comprehensive watershed plan that covered the whole area, and it's a lot of different organizations working together to achieve some of those goals in that plan. So just doing it individually by county doesn't make sense when the water doesn't, really respect our county lines. And so it's a comprehensive grouping of people to do things that are in our watershed plan. And in this area, we have over 90 lakes, hundreds of stream miles of tributary streams, the Straight River, the Cannon River, and then, hundreds of wetlands as well that we're managing. And then underneath that, all that is our groundwater that, many of us are drinking and is important to agricultural sectors as well. And so part of the Cannon River watershed, some of our initiatives from our watershed plan is looking at the septic inventory. So septic systems are a source of, it can be a source of both surface water pollution and groundwater pollution. So we have septic inventories that we're doing throughout the watershed. And then 70% of our land use is agricultural. So we're looking at soil health and field erosion so that farmers can keep that soil and those nutrients on their ground for their own economic benefit and not sending it downstream, causing issues. And then with those 90 lakes that we have, we're doing shoreline surveys and lake management activities today. And this activity that we're doing today, looking at wells is part of our watershed management plan as well, looking at that well health. And so I'm going to turn it over to Ann here, and I'm excited to hear all about this.
Perfect. Thank you. Happy to be here. Screen share. Alrighty. I'm assuming it looks good.
Yep, you're good.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Thanks, everyone. Again, my name is Ann Nelson from Department of Health. I am a health educator at Department of Health, so my main focus is doing education outreach about private wells. So we'll go through the presentation today, but I would love for you to put in the chat one thing you are hoping to learn today. Maybe. Chat is disabled.
Chat's disabled. Well, maybe everybody throw it in the Q&A box then here, or let me see. maybe I can figure out if I can enable it. Give
Okay.
me a minute.
Hey, thanks, anonymous attendee, for letting us know.
All right,
That's okay.
somebody try it now. Let's see if that works.
Ooh, thanks,
Perfect.
Victoria. All right. Well, I will move on, but this gives me a good idea of kind of what to look for and what to talk about. Um, there we go. Okay, cool. So I'll go through kind of how drinking water is managed at the state level, things about private wells regulatory wise. We'll talk about construction just a little bit, and then health effects of a lot of the contaminants that we're looking for, and then how to find some information. So at the state level, water is managed really kind of by these 5 agencies. So we have Department of Natural Resources. Really, they look at the water quantity and ecosystem interactions based on quantity. Bowser is the Board of Water and Soil Resources. They really work with private landowners to establish practices that help protect water quality or improve water quality, things like that. Our Department of Agriculture manages pesticides and fertilizers in drinking water. So nitrate is a big one, but also if there's chemical breakdowns of pesticides or herbicides, they also monitor and look for those things. At the Pollution Control Agency, they also do a lot of water monitoring. They have some water quality standards. And really, I think a pollution control agency is more of man-made chemicals, responses to spills or cleanups, Superfund sites, landfills, things like that. And then at Department of Health, we manage community water systems and non-community. So this could be your rest stop, a daycare, school, office building. We manage all of those. We also enforce the well code, provide some groundwater guidance related to the well code, like where you can construct a well and where you cannot, things like that. And then we do have our private wells group, but it's really a lot of education and outreach. Um, and mostly that's because private well users and owners have very few protections. So in a public water system, so if you pay a water bill, your water really is protected through its whole life cycle. So construction is regulated. They have to provide routine testing. They have to address contaminants, protect source water. There's a lot of funding for construction, treatment, repairs, sealing, all this good stuff. And then sealing is regulated as well. For private well users, we now regulate construction as of 1974. And then we also regulate well sealing. But really anything in between is the responsibility of that private well owner. So they do have to test for contaminants on their own with their own funds. If they need treatment, that is their money that they have to spend and they have to get that installed. Protecting source water, so nobody's coming to your home, looking around your private well, telling you what to do there. And then for construction, treatment, repairs, sealing, all these good things, there are some very, very selective grants and loan programs that are available, but not a whole lot to help people with those costs. So when we're looking at wells, we want to look for a few things at the surface. So this is what a newer well looks like. These things are all required. So it has to have that waterproof gasket on the top here. It needs to be at least 1 foot above the ground surface. And we'll talk about why that is. And then we like to see a well ID tag. Sometimes these fall off. It's okay. It's just a source of information for the next person that comes out and looks at the well. So we'll talk about a couple different types of wells. So the sand and gravel aquifer well style is really common in Minnesota, except for in the southeast and the northeast, just because the bedrock is different. So, but in most of the rest of the state, this is how they're they look. And so you'll have that top part above the soil surface that we just looked at here. This is an electrical line. So this just powers your pump, goes straight into the house. Everything here is grouted in, so that nothing can go down, nothing can come up. We all want it to stay in the same place. Everything down here is in a pipe or a casing. And then down here, we'll look at what this looks like with the screen and the well pump. So here's the well pump. It takes water in from that aquifer here, pushes it up, and the pressure line goes into the house. So very high level overview of how those look. And this is a photo of looking at that screen that's on that pump. And so you can see it has all these really tiny little slots in there. Similar here. And this is just packed with a coarse gravel or rock around the outside of it so that these small particles don't go into your water supply, right? So hopefully this coarse gravel keeps everything out except for the water being able to go into your pump. This is an older style of what you would see, so you wouldn't have anything on the surface in your yard. This is usually in people's basements. Again, this is very old. It's called a piston pump. So how it acts is basically like a plunger. So it just plunges up and down, and the electric motor turns that plunger up and down, and it just charges water into some sort of tank or up to your sink or something like that. Hopefully nobody sees these out in the wild, but if you do see something like this in somebody's basement, you know, kind of know what you're looking at. Another one we sometimes see is these old dug or pit wells. And so people would just literally dig a hole into the ground until they hit that water table and then keep going for a little while for some storage. So water from the soil or from the bedrock moves into that hole and it's just stored there. And then they can pull water out that way. So this is a pretty good representation of what you would look for if you found one on somebody's property. Hopefully it's covered up. We do like these to be sealed, mostly because it's a straight conduit for things to get into your water if they fall from the surface. Also, if there's a flood or rain, that can get in there. We've heard of stories of animals or children falling into these. And so it's not a great situation. So if you do see something or you have one of these, we'd recommend getting it sealed. This is a schematic of a well in bedrock. So this is pretty similar to what we would see in the southeast karst area. There's just not a lot of sand and gravel aquifers. There's bedrock aquifers. And so what happens here is we have that same visual on the top, that cap, 1 foot above the ground surface, etc. We have the electrical line, we have the pressure line into the house. Here's your water table. And then once you get down into the bedrock, there's just not a lot of spaces for that water to be floating around, but that floats around in these cracks in the bedrock. And so what they'll do is they'll put a casing down a little ways just to make sure everything stays in place. And then they'll have this really huge hole that captures water from all these fractures. So these can be several hundred feet deep. We hear a lot of wells in Southeast that are 500-600 feet deep. And so that means you have all of this space in the bedrock to capture water from those fractures. So a couple of construction methods we'll talk about. So there's a mud rotary. And so what they'll do is they'll drill, and I have a little GIF or GIF or whatever you want to call it of a construction. So we'll talk about that. But this is the drill head. And so a mud rotary is where they push pressurized water out of there. So things will shoot to the surface. That rocks, debris, soil, all that stuff will shoot to the surface from that water. Air rotary is similar. It's just pressurized air that goes up. And then a cable tool is like a big hammer, and then they just scoop stuff out of the hole. So let's look at this little graphic. All right. Everybody knows who lives here, Peter Griffin, right? And his family. He lives in a city, so he's probably got a community well, but let's just pretend he's going for a private well. Okay. So here's the well driller. This is a really great picture of what that rig looks like. So they'll come up, they'll put their boom in, and they'll start drilling down into that aquifer. So again, there's that bit. It's kind of turning stuff up and pushing stuff up. So that's where that air rotary or that mud rotary comes into play. Once they get down into that aquifer, um, everything will start going to the surface. They'll pull that out. Sometimes the water will come to the surface if it's under a lot of pressure. They'll put that well pump in with that slotted screen and the casing. Water flows up. Then they'll put that coarse sand and gravel in there to protect it. They'll put a layer of usually like bentonite or clay or some sort of thick substance to keep that gravel in place. And then they'll go and fill in that space around the casing with cement or grout or something, just so nothing can go up and nothing can go down. All right, so when we're talking about groundwater, I think there's maybe this misconception that water lives in underground lakes and like in a cave system. Sure, that is true, but majority of the time it's floating in between pore spaces. So I like to think of a jar of marbles with water in it, right? We're taking out the water that's in between those spaces of the marbles. So this is a good representation of what that looks like. We can get contamination from quite a few sources. So this graphic shows the water table here. So if you dig far enough down, you'll hit the water table. These are showing wells, so a house well, here's another farmhouse well. You can get contamination from pesticides and fertilizers seeping into the ground. Maybe there's a failing septic system, and that can contaminate groundwater. There's a landfill over here, and then an abandoned well is a really great source for pollution because things can just fall right in and contaminate it. One thing I should note is landfills currently are very highly regulated. So hopefully if you're in one of those areas, you know, and PCA monitors those really heavily. The issue we have is buried landfills that we don't quite know about, and then they kind of surprise us sometimes. So thinking about setbacks, we have this owner's guide to wells. If you're interested in that, I think you can just type in MDH, owner's guide to wells, tells you almost everything you need to know about owning a well. One thing is we do have setbacks for wells just to make sure they're protected. So here we want the well at least 3 feet from the house. If you have an in-ground pool, 20 feet from that. Maybe you have an animal or poultry building at least 50 feet away from your well is where we want some of those things. So licensed well contractor does need to know all of these setbacks. And so if you are getting a new well, they will work with you to kind of look at your property and see what's the best and where things need to go. So we know that water is a great solvent, right? It easily dissolves contaminants and carries them downward. We know that shallow wells, so short distance from the surface, are really prone to contamination quickly. And then nitrate is our most common human-controlled groundwater contaminant, and it moves really quickly with water. So the good news, soil is a great filter. Don't downplay the importance of soil and having things getting filtered out that way. We also have confining layers, which can be a thick layer of clay, granite, bedrock, whatever you got in your area. Those really help limit the downward movement of water and can take up to hundreds of years for things to move through them. So they are great at protecting us. And then in the well code, we talk some places that you need to drill down at least a couple of confining layers before you get to a drinkable water source, because maybe the aquifers above we know are not good for human health already. So just keep going down until we get to something that is safe to drink. So plumbing and maintenance, we'll look at a few pictures. So if you're looking around for private wells, seeing what to look for, you have a good idea. Again, this is a great example of a newer constructed well. Everything looks great. So we ask, what's wrong with these wells? And you don't have to type in the chat, mostly because I can't quite see the chat very well. I'll put it over here. There we go. So with these wells, you can see here that that PVC pipe where the electrical conduit goes inside is cracked, right? There's a hole there. Same type of thing with these other two wells. This can happen pretty easily if it's bumped or maybe the ground shifted or something. Somebody drove over where the line is. They can crack pretty easily, but we want that to get that repaired because that is a place for things to enter and go up into your well or down into here and just bothers things, right? The next thing we were looking at is a vent screen. So just to clarify, not all wells have these, only some. If your well does not, please don't be alarmed. So you can see that this little vent screen has this mesh there. So if you do see one of these, just making sure that mesh is all intact and there's no rips or it's not hanging by a thread, falling out. So again, it's just another entry point for things to get into that well. And then the question is, what's wrong with all of these wells? So this one, it is there. You can kind of see it, right? It's right at the surface. And somebody put boulders around. I'm sure they thought it was ugly. I mean, valid, but it's there for a purpose and it's there to serve as your drinking water source. And also, someone's going to need to come service this well at some point in time. And it's going to be very difficult to get access to that well with the truck if they need to, or brush it out or anything like that. So a little landscaping is fine. However, don't obstruct it if you need to get it serviced. That would be an issue in the future. This one, where our casing is obviously cracked right here. So every time it rains, that rainwater is just going to go straight down into your drinking water. And then here, somebody built a nice roof. It looks wonderful. However, this is completely detached. So it's not doing much good. Again, you'll get rain that comes in or snow, or if there's a flood, water can get right in there. Or animals, mice. We've seen a lot of pictures of mice in wells. The next thing we'll talk about quickly is flooding. So that 1 foot above the surface where the well terminates really is important for flooding. So here's a picture. It's not super great, but here's the well. Here's all this flooding that's coming up to the well. So like if that terminated at the surface, that would be compromised, right? But that 1 foot above the surface is kind of providing some protection there. So I'll go through all the contaminants that we're pretty concerned about at MDH. And so there's 5 currently. So we'll go through all of these: coliform bacteria, nitrate, arsenic, lead, and manganese. And then one thing we really want to note is that you cannot see, smell, or taste any of these. So we do get a lot of calls about like my water smells not great or it's staining or things like that. Really, those aren't health concerns to an extent. These other ones, your water could taste great, but be high in some of these contaminants. So for coliform bacteria, so we'll have this action level, which is our maximum contaminant level set by the EPA. So any detection of coliform bacteria, we want you to take some action. Health impacts. So again, coliform bacteria doesn't really pose a health risk itself. It's just an indicator of another problem. So it can indicate bacteria or parasites from another animal. Sources, so a failing septic system is a big one. A damaged well or plumbing is also a big one. And then for testing recommendations, we say test at least once a year for coliform bacteria. So again, the bacteria itself doesn't pose a health risk, but things like E. coli and other parasites do. And so it's just an indicator of some other problem going on. And it's really found in the feces of warm-blooded animals. So again, it could be a septic leak or a failing septic system. Can also be animals that are living on the surface that are maybe near your well, or if there's a feedlot close by that's not um, working well, that can also be an indicator. So if you do have coliform bacteria detected, get your drinking water from another source and inspect your system. Maybe it's cracked and you just need to repair. That helps a lot sometimes. And then also disinfecting your well and your water system. So you can hire a licensed well contractor, but if that is not in the cards, you can do it yourself. We do have instructions on how to do it yourself at home on our website. For nitrate, our action level is 10 milligrams per liter. The health impacts really who gets sick first is bottle-fed infants under 6 months of age. So what will happen is they will get what's called methemoglobinemia or blue baby syndrome. And so it just affects how the oxygen is carried in their blood and they turn blue because they're basically suffocating because there's no oxygen. There is some emerging science on the long-term effects or the long-term exposure of nitrate. However, there's just not a scientific consensus yet on what level that is or what the effects are, but MDH is watching it pretty closely. The sources, so agricultural, residential fertilizer, and then human and animal waste. And then for testing, we recommend testing every year for nitrate as well. So where are the issues with nitrate? So this map, take it with a grain of salt, both of these maps. This is new constructed wells. So from 1992 to 2022, it does not include older wells that were constructed before the well code. So just a FYI. But the darker blue dots, which are mostly concentrated in the central area, there are a few in the southwest, southeast, and along the Wisconsin border. Those are wells that were constructed and the nitrate was already over 10 milligrams per liter. We kind of know that it's really sandy here and nitrate moves pretty quickly. So, and then this map is of the MDA township testing results that they've been doing in the past few years. And also, again, they did not test every township, just the ones that are gray, green, and red. And the red townships are where 10% or more of the wells had 10 milligrams per liter or more. So again, concentrated a little bit in the Central Sands area and then the southeast. So if nitrate's above 10 milligrams per liter, get your water from a different drinking water source. Do not boil the water. It just concentrates the nitrate. Don't give the water to infants under 6 months of age. Inspect your system. Again, maybe there's a crack somewhere, and that's really all you need to do is fix that crack to help repair the system. Remove potential sources of nitrate from near your well. So maybe a fertilizer sitting out there or something that's kind of contaminating it. And then long term, either drill a new well into a new aquifer or install a home water treatment system. So the most common treatment is reverse osmosis for nitrate. For arsenic, action level is really any detection. So if you have anything over the detection limit, we recommend you treat. If it's over 10 micrograms per liter, this is parts per billion, we strongly recommend that you treat. That is the community water standard as well. For health impacts, this is really a long-term exposure to arsenic over your lifetime. So it can increase the risks of cancer, bladder cancer, lung, liver cancer. It can lower IQ in children, increase the risk of diabetes and heart disease. There's pretty strong evidence of all of those. Sources, it's naturally occurring. So we say geogenic. It's really in the rocks and in the soil. Formerly, it was used in like wood preservatives and pesticides. And then for testing, we say at least once. When you drill a new well, they will test it for you. Or if you move to a new location, we recommend testing things like that. And so where is arsenic concentrations highest? It's kind of a smattering throughout the state. And so here is this map of newly constructed wells again. So you can see over 10 parts per billion or micrograms per liter. It kind of follows this same shape as shown over here. And so this was the last glaciation of the Des Moines lobe. So you can see where the edges of that terminated. It kind of follows closely to where that's at. However, we do see concentrations of arsenic in other parts of the state that were not part of that glaciation. But there's a little bit of correlation. So even if you live in the Southeast, we do recommend you test for arsenic anyways. If arsenic is detected, again, the treatment is reverse osmosis system or an absorptive media, iron oxidized. Oxidation is most common, and then anion exchange system. For lead, the action level is any level. So we know that it causes a lot of issues with the brain and development and the nervous system. So really children and babies, pregnant women are at the highest risk of this. It causes damage to the brain, kidneys, nervous system, can slow development. The sources, so this is not usually found in groundwater. It's really found in older homes with lead pipes or lead solder, or maybe there's a really old well and the materials in that have lead in them. So those are kind of the sources of that. For testing at least once, and especially if you move into an older home, we really phased out lead in the 90s. Um, so if you're moving into a brand new home, hopefully that's not an issue, but again, mostly older homes. So if lead is detected, a really great way to minimize your exposure is just to let the water run for about 30 seconds to a minute before you use it for drinking or cooking. Another good idea is to use the cold water for drinking or cooking, mostly because the hot water um, helps leach the lead out of the pipes and the system quickly. So cold water doesn't do that as fast. Um, if you're really rich, you have a lot of money running around, replace the lead components. That will solve the issue. And then for home water treatment, again, it's reverse osmosis, distillation. There are some carbon pitcher filters that are fairly cheap that work great. And then an alternate water source. So for manganese, we kind of have two action levels. So children under 1, if your level is above 100 micrograms per liter, we say to take action. If there is only people older than 1 in the home, it can be up to 300 micrograms per liter. Just children under 1 digest it differently and drink a lot more water than the rest of us in comparison to our diet. Health impacts. So again, this is a long-term exposure thing, can cause deficits in memory, attention span, and motor skills. This is similar to arsenic, where it's just naturally occurring in the rocks in the soil. And for testing, really once or before baby drinks the water. And so here is a very old map, sorry about that, of where manganese concentrations are. So the purple is less than 25% of that area is affected, and the red is more than 75% of that area is affected by manganese. So most of the state, except for really the southeast, and that's mostly because of the bedrock in that area. So if manganese level comes back unsafe, again, get a drinking water from a different source. And then a lot of people treat it with water softening. That's pretty effective. And most people already have water softeners. Again, there's also some carbon filter filters that work. And then distillation is a method as well. For finding a laboratory to get your water tested, so we do update our maps quite frequently. I would say at least once a year of the labs that accept samples from private well users. So you can go on our MDH website. you can just Google MDH well testing results, MDH accredited water sampling labs, things like that. There's a PDF version. There is a searchable online version, so you can put in what you want to test for, and it'll spit out some answers of labs that do that. For us, we work a lot with this SEMWAL laboratory out of Rochester. So they are helping with all of our EPA testing, nitrate testing that we need to do in the area. They've been a great partner, but there are other labs that may be closer to you that also accept samples. For taking a sample, so if you do go through an accredited lab, they will give you instructions on how to do that sample. But in general, we say get the sample from where you get your drinking water mostly. So like for me, that would be my kitchen sink. Um, do test it before a water treatment device. You can also do before and after samples to see if your device is working properly. Um, remove the faucet screen and the rubber washer. So if you have a regular type of sink, there's a little screen that you can screw off. Take that off. Flame or disinfect the faucet. This just kills some of the bacteria that might come into contact with your sample. And then run the cold water for about 5 minutes. So that just flushes everything out of the system. So you're not getting anything that maybe was sitting in the pipes overnight or just kind of hanging out in there. For a lead sample, that is a little different because we know it comes from the pipes. So taking that sample right away in the morning before you've used any water is when you would do that. We do have a video on how to do this on our YouTube channel. So our channel is MN Health, and the video is called How to Test Your Well Water. So things you can do to help ensure you have a good drinking water system. Just thinking about the contamination entry points into groundwater. So again, take a look at that well, make sure nothing's broken or inadequate or you see any cracks anywhere. If you do, try to get those fixed. Thinking about lead, the plumbing components are really the issue with that one. And then also plumbing cross contamination or cross connection. We do see sometimes people like to do their own DIY projects, but we just have to be really careful when coming into contact with our drinking water system and making sure nothing backflows into the well or anything like that. So how do you protect your well? This is our little slogan is tips. So test your water, inspect your well, protect your well, and seal any unused wells. And then where can you get information on some private wells in Minnesota? So we do have what's called the Minnesota Well Index. Again, you can just Google Minnesota Well Index. It should be the first thing that pops up. There is a map version, well, like what's shown here. There's also a text version. So you can search by your address, township, range, whatever you want. And then what will show up. So this is along Duluth Lakeshore or Lake Superior Lakeshore, and you can see all these little dots. So in this map, you can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can get as close as you want. So all of these dots are wells that have been recorded by the state. And you can click on each of those dots and it will show up with some information of like how deep that well is, who installed it, some of the water chemistry testing data is all there. So if you do have a well, I encourage you to go look for it. Well, one caveat is we think this contains about maybe 50% of the wells that we know of in Minnesota. That is partially because we didn't start the well code until 1974. So there were a lot of wells that people are still using that are constructed before that time that we just don't have records for. So those are not in there. Also, it took a few years, to get in the groove. And so some folks weren't able to report the first few years. And then sometimes it just takes a while for the data to get put in the system. So if you don't see your well in there, it's okay. Nothing you've done is the issue. It just may be older or not quite in the system yet. So I'll talk about a few educational things we got going on also at MDH. And so we do have 2 brochures available now that you can order. We have a third one for realtors. That's not shown here, but we have fact sheets also. So fact sheets for our top 5 contaminants: arsenic, bacteria, lead, manganese, nitrate. We also have our webpage for well testing results and options available as a printable fact sheet. Those are translated into Spanish, Somali, and Hmong already. So the 2 brochures we have are Well Watering Your Baby and Owner's Guide to Wells. Those are available for English and Spanish. You can order them free of charge. I do have the Somali and Hmong ones on my desk, soon to be available. So those are coming. We also have this realtor training. So if you know a realtor that's interested in private wells or works with private well users, realtors get 2 CEU credits for taking this course. So it's about 2 hours long. It's for free on our website. And it just really is focused on what they need to do at property transfer and things they should look for around private wells. And then additional things we're doing. So we're trying to improve our communications from MDH. Really, this is for our partners. What are we working on? For example, our realtor training, how's that going? Things like that. So we're working to do that. Our focus populations for education and outreach, again, are realtors right now and rental property owners who might have renters kind of in a disadvantaged situation running a property from them that's on a private well. Those 2 are our focus areas because of a grant we have through CDC. We are also working to create online trainings for partners around private wells. So this is natural resource professionals, local public health, etc. That should be available by the end of the summer. We do provide over the phone technical assistance every day to people. So people call in and they have questions about testing or treatment. And then we are trying to improve our existing online materials and just provide them in different formats so we can engage with everyone. We also have this Minnesota Data Access Portal, Public Health Access Portal. So you can go on this website. I think it's at the bottom, that data.web health state. And you can look up water quality data. There is a lot of information about community water systems, but we're adding some about private wells in Southeast. So that will get better with time as we have more data to share. But we're also working on some indicators. So the number of home on private wells, risk of nitrate contamination, arsenic concentrations, and flood hazard areas. So that will be in there soon as we are going through a little bit of a IT update on our tracking portal. Another couple projects we're working on is a statewide assessments of knowledge, attitudes, beliefs of private well users. So that's with Dr. May Davenport at the U of M. That is currently ongoing. Surveys are being sent out. So we hope to have those results maybe sometime in 2026. And then we're also starting this private well stewardship education network with the University of Minnesota Extension. That project is just starting. So if you're super interested in private wells, want to learn more, want to do some outreach in your community, there may be an opportunity for that in the next couple of years. So that is all I have for now. So I think I'm going to turn it back over.
All right.
And happy to answer questions at the end.
Okay, I'm just getting my slides back up. This is Victoria. And so in the Cannon River watershed, we do have a cost share program for well sealing. And so Anne had mentioned that unsealed wells that are being unused are a source of groundwater contamination. This is something we're concerned about. And so we do have this cost share program. So if you listeners know of anybody who's got an unsealed well or you have one yourself, you can approach your local soil and water conservation district in your county to access this program that's through the Cannon River watershed. And then some specifics for testing in our area. Let me see why I can't advance. Okay, so well testing, there are several counties that are in the Cannon River watershed. Each county kind of has its own way that they're going about doing it. And then some of the counties have some additional programs available. So in Dakota County, there's free or discounted testing. In Goodhue County, there's a testing kit that's available. In LeSueur County, they do it through a testing clinics. Rice County has free testing if you're eligible for that. In Steele County, they do offer a testing kit, and Waseca County directs you to that MDA site that Ann mentioned. In Dakota County and Rice County, they do have some money at the county level for some well remediation if you're having some issues. And in Goodhue County, they kind of go through some flooding precautions if you're susceptible to flooding in your area where your well is. And that's it. We can open it up now for questions.
All right. Thanks, Victoria, and thanks, Ann. We do have a couple questions here. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and type them in that Q&A box there at the bottom of the screen. So first question, somebody's wondering, do you know what % of wells in the watershed are contaminated with nitrate over or just above the Department of Health? Oh, that one kind of disappeared on me here.
Sorry.
Oh, you're good. Yeah. So is that the information there for that?
So I will answer this, and
Okay.
I provided a link as well, and there may be other resources. So one thing that maybe people don't know is that when people get their water tested and pay for it themselves, we do not get those results. So the information we have currently is from newly constructed wells, and those have quite a few protections from the well code. So it is a bit of a biased answer, and gives this false impression that things are really okay because we know some aquifers are contaminated. We just avoid those. So I think one, we don't really have specific data from individual wells that people test on their own. Two, the data we do have is a little biased. Three, I put in a link to MDA's Southeast Volunteer Nitrate Monitoring Network. They also have the township testing data, which I can share a link to as well. And those might be really good resources for you if you're looking for a specific area to see nitrate results. So again, Department of Ag is the one who monitors those really for agricultural purposes. So feel free to look through those and look through those results. Sorry, that doesn't quite answer your question, but again, it depends. And it also depends on how, like if you're getting your water from a well, how deep is your well? How is it constructed? Things like that.
Yeah, for sure. So then I got another question here. The next one's kind of a big one there. So their well is 17 years old, 360 feet deep in northwest Rice County, Webster Township. They've experienced some residual black sediment in the toilet, and if left undisturbed for some time, the toilet stains. They're also wondering, if they run a bucket of water then and let it rest, the sediment kind of settles out there. So they're wondering, is that the well screen being an issue, or what is the issue that is possibly causing that sediment in the water?
Yeah, great question. So it sounds like you have a manganese issue. Um, so manganese can be pretty fine. So I also have a private well and my toilet tank turns black just because the water just sits in there, we don't scrub out the toilet tank or anything. So similar type of situation. Sometimes the particles are just so fine that it can get through that gravel, or maybe that gravel is setted and there's, just ways for water and particles to seep in there. So one thing you could do is if you have a whole home sediment filter, so this Like we have one of these, it goes from the pressure tank in the basement straight through this filter, which is not very big. You can buy it at Menards and install it, and all your water filters through there. It's just an extra thing for place for those particles to get trapped. Otherwise, water softening helps catch some of those black particles and minerals. So I'm also going to put in a little thing on manganese and drinking water in the answer form here. Hopefully that
Perfect.
answers your question. Please let me know if you're interested in more.
Well, it definitely answers mine because I have a private well, and it kind of sounds like the same situation for sure too. So
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah. So all right, we got one more that popped in here. So somebody found a hand dug rock lined well, or rock lined 10-foot deep well on their land 30 years ago, filled it in with soil. Was that an acceptable solution?
Yeah, so good question. Props to you for filling it in in the first place. Most people don't do that. Um, I think it depends on how far down the soil was. So if it just ended in the soil, topsoil, I think that's an okay situation. If it got down to bedrock where there's lots of cracks and stuff, mm, I think, if you filled it in 30 years ago, I'm sure things have settled and hopefully that's an okay solution for now. And you don't need to dig it up and put concrete in there.
All right. No more questions have been coming in. Oh, but here we got, can you comment on Niagara Bottling Corp. in Elko New Market and concerns for private wells in that area?
Yeah, great question. So we're very aware of the Elko New Market situation. Um, our colleagues, I think it's at MPCA, are really the ones, no, at DNR, sorry, at Department of Natural Resources are the ones dealing with that. I can try to find a link for you, but if you're really curious about it, DNR has consulted with us and they're really managing that situation. Sorry, that's not a great answer, but that's who I would contact.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. And then over in the chat, kind of from your questions from earlier that you asked the crowd. So Victoria was wondering if her neighbors use water softener and they have a septic system. Is that going to affect her well water in a sandy soil area?
Mm. So the biggest thing I can see with a water softener is just the salts that come with it. Yeah, so it's an issue, the amount of salt that comes out of water softeners. We're not quite sure the best way to tackle it because people love their soft water. But yeah, salt is a pretty big contaminant that we have to deal with. Everything else, I I'm not too in tune if any issues coming from having a lot of water softeners other than the salt. Yeah, great question.
Yeah. And then looks like somebody was wondering if you could comment on the multiplicity of responsibilities for water in Minnesota state government. So I'm assuming that's getting at the different jurisdictions and all that stuff. And
Yeah. So if this person would want to provide more context, I'm happy to get into more detail. I think maybe it's getting at the fact that maybe we're a little siloed. Um, so from the outside, it may look like we are very siloed, but we do work together really well and collaborate together really well. We have meetings all the time between our different agencies and like our respective subject matter areas. Hopefully that's the question or the answer you were looking for, but happy to provide more detail.
all right, thank you. Yep,
Yeah.
silos and multiple agencies. Yep, perfect. You
Okay.
got it. So good deal.
Yeah.
Looks like we got another one that popped in here. So, um, It seems that safe levels of chemicals can combine in ways to cause DNA mutations. I believe Oklahoma State did some work on this. Amphibian eggs are incubated in the water and observed for mutation. Is this sort of thing used? So,
Interesting question, Roger. So I truly have no idea about looking at eggs or any sort of research like that. We do have quite a few toxicologists here, way above my pay grade, that look at those sorts of studies and submit for studies at a national level. So I don't know of anything about DNA mutations, but I'm sure someone here maybe has heard of it.
all right. Thank you for that. All right. Well, we're kind of getting down here on time. We do have about 3 more minutes left. So if anybody's got any other questions, you can throw those in quick. Otherwise, I think we're going to wrap it up here. So I just want to thank both Ann and Victoria again for coming on and talking today, and thanking everybody in the group here for coming on and listening. And I'll let everybody know too that we typically send out a follow-up email that usually includes the slides from the presentation if the presenter wants to share those, and then any other follow-up stuff. And because this webinar is recorded, then the recording also gets posted on the Cannon River Watershed website as well. So yeah, with that, thank you both, and we'll talk to you later.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks.